Welcome, everybody. We're here for another session, halfway through the second week, where we're looking at how we can catalyse a journey to net zero in the third sector. And we have Joan Laurie and Yvonne McBride joining us to offer some insight into this topic. And Yvonne, I've noticed that you've just gone off camera here. Are you able to put your camera back on?
Yeah, I don't know why it did that, but anyway.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to you, Yvonne, to kind of start. I mean, how can we catalyse the journey to net zero in the third sector? I know you've got some slides. I know you're going to want to introduce Joan at some stage. So we'll just have a wee chat and then go into some Q&A and some conversation.
Yeah, if you want to just bring my slides up, Tabitha, they can sit there, that's fine.
Perfect.
So I'll just start by introducing myself and welcoming everyone to this session. So my name is Yvonne McBride and my day job is with Partnership for Procurement, so supporting third sector organisations on collaboration and tendering. And I sit as a project within SENSCOP, which is the national membership intermediary organisation to promote networking within the sector, social enterprise network support, and to raise awareness really of the work that the sector does and campaign on issues on their behalf. So SENSCOP leads on this net zero strategy group, which was set up sort of last year or just at the end of the year before actually. So I'm just going to tell you a wee bit about the work that's been going on with the group, and then I'll be joined later in the session by Joan Laurie from Thurso Community Development Trust, so sort of spotlight on her work, which is much more probably interesting than my slides, but hopefully it will give you a flavour of what the group's been doing. So just move on to the next slide, please, Tabitha. So the net zero steering group really sort of set up wanting to make a space for enterprise and third sector and the work that they do. So creating the awareness of all that work that's been taking place around climate change and net zero with the sector, and promoting that work really and demonstrating the sort of positive impact that the third sector has on not just the people that they work with, but place and planet as well, and help develop the sector and give it that space as a natural leader. So really the sort of first slide shows you the national organisations and the intermediary organisations that are on that steering group, or some of them. There's actually a bit more now, but this gives you a flavour of who's involved in that steering group that's led by SENSCOP. Just move on to the next slide and really just focusing on the strategy. So as I said, the strategy was developed at the end of sort of December 2020, and it's sort of high level objectives, and we did that strategy in consultation with our members and the sector, and really those objectives want to raise awareness of what's happening, showcase that information and showcase those good practice examples, but we also wanted to lead by examples. So certainly supporting the sector to embed net zero and all things climate into their sort of policies and strategies and future planning, and also to stimulate that sort of innovation and investment into the sector, because we know that the sector does have a challenge in terms of bringing in that investment which is needed to actually deliver that environmental justice moving forward. So just next slide please, Tabitha. So in terms of what we've done so far, the strategy is there, it's available, and I've got the link to that later on. We then went out to our members, so SENSCOP and SCVO went out to members and to the wider sector with a survey just to see where organisations were at and get a feel for what some of the issues were in the sector. So we kind of found overall that the sector really was a bit behind in terms of their approach to addressing climate. Around half of the organisations sort of had minimal or zero engagement, and then the other half had some engagement. So the survey showed really that most of the organisations identified their sort of core purpose as social and not environmental. So there wasn't that link being made between that sort of social justice and the environmental justice. And we know that climate affects, that sort of environmental injustice affects most people who are what we would call in disadvantaged or are poorer communities, more isolated communities, and those that are most disengaged really with this environmental agenda. But what we did find that there was that motivation to engage in climate action and the appetite. Organisations wanted to do more. And it wasn't a lack of awareness or willingness to do that, but often a lack of confidence. So whilst organisations were involved in activity and delivering on some of this agenda, there was a lot of information overload, a lot of stuff out there. Organisations weren't necessarily sure or confident that they were doing the right thing, or you know, they didn't want to often give us the examples because they weren't really sure, as I say, that it was the right thing. So we took from that there was maybe an impetus problem, and how we accelerate that, I suppose, is moving to the next stage. So just the next slide, Tabitha. In terms of the links to the strategy and the survey, as I said, you can find out more and get the detail here. For us, there's currently a bit of research that we're undertaking just quickly around sort of 6 weeks. It should be ready by December, which is the date of our next Net Zero Steering Group and draft, that will look at really the gaps in support, a bit of a mapping exercise of what is out there, because we know there's a number of tools out there, a number of supports and a number of funds, but it can be quite a confusing landscape. So we're doing a bit of a mapping around that and a bit of a gap analysis really, which will then inform our action plan. So that's the next stage that we're moving to, and hopefully early in the year that will be published, and we'll pull in some resources and collaborate with our partners nationally to actually deliver some of those actions and support the sector and build capacity moving forward. I'm just going to pass over to Joan now, who's going to tell you about the work that they're involved in Thurso, and give us a flavour of that.
Hello everyone. So I'm the development manager for Thurso Community Development Trust. We're only 3 years old, but to give an indication of the kind of trajectory that we've been on, in 2018 we had a voluntary project officer, which was me. As of last Monday, I now have 14 staff. I'm currently recruiting for another 3 staff, and I will actually hope to have 20 staff in place by the end of this financial year. So it gives a bit of an indication as the kind of movement that we've been on. But I'll rewind a little bit, and I'll just explain a little bit about Thurso to begin with. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with Thurso. Quite often when I mention Thurso to anybody, the one thing that I get is, oh, I've been to Thurso. Yeah, you actually passed through on your way to Orkney. So you were going to Scrabster and you were going to get the ferry. That's how most people know of Thurso. We are known as the kind of gateway to Orkney because the ferry leaves from Scrabster to go over to Stromness. We're a main stopping point on the North Coast 500, but we're not a tourism town in any shape or form because we've had another large industry. So Thurso was, like most Highland towns along the coasts back in the 1950s, a little fishing village, a kind of trading post, place for farming, fishing, and they decided, the UK government that was at the time, our MP at the time, somebody called David Robertson, pushed for there to be a large industry sited in Caithness, and that was the Dunry nuclear establishment. It came here in the mid-1950s. Thurso went from a population in just under 4 years, a population of 3,000 to around 9,000. Dunry has had a massive impact on this area. I'm presenting this from home. I live on what is called the Dunry Housing Estate, the Atomics, that's what we affectionately like to call it. They built houses, there was clubs, there were societies, there was a major influx, obviously economically. It has supported this area economically. It looms large on this area. It is our largest both direct and supply chain employer. There are more engineers per head of population in Caithness than there are anywhere else in the UK. I'm not 100%, that's maybe an anecdotal statistic, but that's what we're always told. In the mid-1990s, they announced that Dunry was being decommissioned. So we are in the process of losing our major direct and indirect supply chain employer. But getting rid of a nuclear power plant is not that simple. It has actually employed more people since the mid-1990s than it did when it actually put power into the national grid. So that instills a false sense of security within a community. But we are looking at full closure of that site by the mid-2030s. That's what the estimated date is. And we're a community which has significant inequalities. If you are fortunate enough to be within that you're either in Dunry or a lot of people are in oil and gas or in associated engineering, you have quite a lot. There's lots of other people who are left behind. The towns of Wick and Thurso are very similar. We both have an influx from Dunry and an influence from Dunry, but in Wick you could see probably higher levels of actual deprivation. In Thurso, what you can see is not just deprivation, it's inequalities. It's the difference between who has and who doesn't have. Thurso has a nickname of being the energy town. That was, somebody used it in marketing a while ago, and this will all make sense when I get to where we are. So we formed as a result of Dunry is closing down and we need to do something proactively about our area. That frequent war cry of somebody needs to do something about Thurso. And when we formed 3 years ago, we went out and we asked the people of Thurso what they wanted. Turns out nobody had asked anybody in Thurso what they wanted for a really long time. And we got 1,200 responses. We're now at a population of about 7,000. So you're talking about a 20% response rate. We, from there, formed a strategic plan, and we had climate action embedded within that plan. But we have never shouted climate. We have never said that we are an environmental organisation. We have never said that we are a climate organisation. We have never, up until now, and I'll come to that, a net zero organisation. We have just embedded it in our daily activities and everything to do with what we do as an organisation. So right back in those early days, if you came to an outdoor event with us, you wouldn't have been handed a polystyrene cup, you would have, or a paper cup, you would have been handed a mug. It's just, it's throughout absolutely everything that we do. We've done projects in the last 3 years and continue to do projects in the last 3 years, which obviously have a little bit more of an environmental aim to it. We have a community garden, and we do lots of workshops about food waste minimisation, things like that. That was funded by the Climate Challenge Fund. So that is more obviously climate. But again, we don't shout about it because we want it to be an everyday embedded action in what people are doing. So if we can lead by example, then hopefully our community will then follow suit. Where we are at the moment is we are, so getting to be more obviously climate, we are in the process of opening a zero waste refill shop. And we've also taken over extensive council greenhouses in Thurso, where we are putting in a social enterprise called Socially Growing. And that social enterprise it's there to grow local food. It's there to grow plug plants. Hopefully we're going to find a lovely market in all of these amazing community growing spaces that are springing up all over Scotland. There's nothing better than plants that have been hardened off in the north of Scotland. and we'll have our zero waste refill shop, and those will generate an income. But what's actually behind that social enterprise is that we are going to provide youth training facilities in climate, land-based and enterprise skills, so that the people who are being left behind in this community have the opportunity. So anybody that has, you know, I'm looking for the kind of trainees that we're looking for are the people who have addiction issues, mental health issues. There is widespread addiction and mental health issues in Caithness, in Thurso. During the pandemic, there was 18 suicides. So that gives a significant indication as to the sort of issues that we're facing here. And we want to be able to give people an opportunity. And we want to be able to take that tagline of Energy Thurso, of Thurso being the energy town, and capitalise on where we are with that Dunry decommissioning process. One of the things that happens with a decommissioning process of a nuclear power plant is that there's significant socio-economic investment into an area as that industry exits. So we are looking to capitalise on that now with forming our own net zero strategy for Thurso, which is entirely community-led. One of the things that we did very early on was we made a decision that you had this kind of sense of community apathy in Thurso, and that lots of groups would form and then disappear again, and they all had the same thought that they would get money from Dunry to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. And it's not that easy. You don't just get money from Dunry. But if you go to them with a strategy and they're also trying to have an exit strategy, then how can we create a truly community-led net zero Thurso? We've just recently employed a net zero graduate who's looking at what our baseline is across the town and what can be done in terms of a strategy, but also how that strategy solves the inequalities, because there are significant inequalities, and how can we actually make a greener and a better place for people in the future, particularly young people. The area is forecast to have 21% depopulation by the mid-2040s. And we want young people to be able to stay here. We want to be a leader in how we create a green and a more pleasant place to live, and also how we can tie all of those net zero strategies into solving the inequalities that we have here. We already do some things. We have things like a community larder where we share food. Obviously, with what we're starting at the greenhouses, but what can be done more than that? What can be done in terms of retrofitting homes? What can be done in terms of food insecurity, fuel insecurity is a significant issue here. And if we go in with a community-led strategy, how can we use that to, you know, obviously work with partners and then move that up the chain? But our ambition is to be the first net zero town in Scotland. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know, but that is what our ambition is currently. And it's and the entire reason for it is to be more environmental, to take that tagline of that energy town and turn it into the low energy town, the zero energy town. But how do we do that whilst also addressing the very, very significant issues that we have within our community?
Thank you very much, Joan and Yvonne. And it's fascinating listening to you, because I know that some people might have come into today's conversation and gone, what does this have to do with mobility? And what we're really talking about is social mobility and the need for a just transition, in that if we only focus on the environmental aspects, we're ignoring the social aspects. And I think it was really, you know, enlightening for me to see the results of your study, Yvonne, to actually find out that there's this significant gap between people viewing environmental and social as separate. And that was actually a really interesting theme that emerged from our live event during the panel discussions with SME businesses, where many of the businesses were talking about the reasons that they got involved is environmental and it's profit making. But as you go down and on the journey, the environmental morphs into social, because more and more people are realizing that you can't do one without the other. And I think what's really fascinating in terms of the results of the study that you've talked about there is actually the third sector, and what you're discovering is the social aspects. There needs to be almost this feedback loop going back and forward between those who are stronger in environmental and those who are stronger in social, and stronger communication bonds, you know, so that you're really following that just transition, but also embedding it in. So not making the big song and dance, because another theme that came through quite clearly in yesterday's conversations, and it's emerged through some of the other conversations, is this idea that sustainability is a middle class sport, and how, you know, you need to be already in a state of privilege before you do something about it. And what you've beautifully highlighted there, Joan, is if you just make the small shifts and embed it in how you actually approach stuff, then you're modeling it, and actions speak louder than words. So, you know, the cup there, and not having the paper cups, and what that then looks like, and the message that's set in there, so that you can actually bring people in and on the journey, but make it seem just normal. And that's really powerful for me, because just listening to the, you know, the complexity of what you're talking about with the social issues and the suicides, and Jimmy made a comment while you were talking, you know, 18 suicides, that's a major social impact. And, you know, something that I'm still quite emotional about is that yesterday, as we started the event at the Falkirk Wheel, the trains were delayed, but it actually turned out that the trains were delayed because somebody had jumped off one of the bridges. And this is this, you know, it's like it's happening and it's unfolding right in front of us, you know, as you're highlighting there. People are dying, the environment's degrading, and how do we actually make that link back and forth so that we're creating healthy people and we're creating a healthy planet at the same time? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to open it up to the floor for questions, comments, feedback, so that we can move into a more conversational flow. What's coming up for people as you're listening to this? What do you want to know more about? What would you like to learn?
Personally, I'd just like to know everything about this sort of community engagement plan and everything to do with that. But I don't know, that would take over the conversation. So maybe another time would be good to talk about that. But yeah, just anything else about that, and like what you have in mind for what you're trying to do with the community and what you'd want to see. And I just want to hear about that.
Can I also give a bit of context, Joan, just before you jump in there, because you and Stuart need to have a conversation offline, because Stuart's one of our net zero ninjas, but his background and his master's research is in community resilience. Now, I have read the piece, his dissertation, throughout the last 2 weeks, and it's phenomenal. And there's a lot of interest in parallels in terms of conversations and relationships and learnings that will be able to flow from the two of you beyond what we're about to have conversation-wise today.
I would definitely be very interested, Stuart. And also, I'm sure our net zero graduate would be very interested as well. We have a lovely young man called Bruce Donald on board, and he is, yeah, he only started not even 10 days ago, and he's already wowing me. So yeah. In terms of the engagement, so one of the things that we have been highly praised for as an organisation is how we've engaged with our community up until now. I mean, the evidence is in that first consultation that we did, where we got kind of 20% of the town. We don't just, you know, put out a survey, we really consult and we really engage, and engagement is it's a two-way street. We have, you know, we share our successes, our failures, everything with the community. When something hasn't gone right for us, we tell the community exactly what it is that's gone on. In terms of the net zero strategy for the engagement, things like we currently have, we produce a community magazine, which the community just love. We initially did it to make money, to be honest, and then COVID happened and we got some funding, and we've been able to put it out free. So we've actually got a survey out currently in our community magazine, which has gone through every single door. And because it's a community magazine, so it tells lots of community stories, and then in the middle, the centre pages, it has this survey. So we've reeled them in by doing that. But then we'll be working with lots of focus groups. We're actually hoping to do quite a lot of work with young people as well within focus groups in that net zero strategy. And then how we kind of marry it together. We work generally as an organisation using that sort of sociocratic principles, where we have our various circles of people and we all sort of join together. We engage very well with people who are experiencing disadvantage in the community, mainly by just speaking to them as a human being. There's no other way that I can put it. in terms of the sort of strategy towards that engagement, we're kind of going soft at the moment, where there's this consultation that's out in Community Magazine. There's also an online survey that's out. There's quite a lot of social media activity going on. And then we'll start to move it then into focus groups. So we're actually trying to look for people at the moment who are going to contribute to these different groups that we will use over this 12 months and beyond, because forming a net zero strategy is not something that's just for 12 months while you've got a high graduate. It's going to be for a long time. But what we're actually looking to do within this 12 months is get some form of a strategy in place, get our baseline emissions first of all, and then get the strategy in place. But actually we're looking to build a movement. It's more that it's becoming a net zero town is bigger than one organisation. Us as the kind of definition of development trust, we're a community anchored organisation. So it's not about us having that as an organisation, having that big slice, you know, having a big pie that we're the ones that are doing it. It's about all of the community and all making sure that everybody within the community has a slice of that pie.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Tabitha, could I jump in?
Yes, please do, Linda.
I'm not quite sure if it's a question, but reflecting on Yvonne's presentation, which was really helpful, thank you. You picked up on the fact that there is awareness amongst the SE community of the importance of driving towards net zero, but it's not reflected in their ambition in terms of strategies and plans, etc. And for me, I think there's an inherent conflict between organisations who may understand the need to transition, but are not embracing that the responsibility rests with them. And I think that's evident today. I'm disappointed by the numbers of people who are on the call from the SE sector. We pushed really hard to encourage members of our network in West Lothian and across wider networks to come and participate. So I think the work that you've described, that mapping piece, will be particularly important, because I think it's about how we fund organisations to do what Joan's describing, to do that piece around building their baseline and developing their strategies and focusing on their primary actions. And I think it's particularly important because Joan mentioned the Climate Challenge Fund, which I understand is closed now. So what therefore do we look to for getting monies to energise these organisations to come forward and begin to change their way of working, to change their mindset, and to do, as Joan's describing, looking more about the interrelationship between their journey to net zero and how it can be delivering some of their other strategic objectives around no one left behind.
Yeah, Linda, I think Joan made a really good point about saying at the very start of her presentation about embedding. And, you know, they weren't set up as a climate action organisation, but they just embedded it in. And it goes back to that, looking what you're already doing in this journey and actually beginning to understand the links between that social justice and environmental justice, and being able to demonstrate, you know, that actually you may be doing good things, and how do you actually, you know, begin to measure that and evidence that? Because obviously from my day-to-day work around procurement for funding and tendering, that's going to have to happen. And I do have concerns around capacity of the sector to actually be able to demonstrate that moving forward without the resources. I know there's a conversation just now around sort of business support moving forward and what that might incorporate. So that will give some practical support to the sector, but ultimately there will need to be additional resources, and that's the kind of conversation that we're having just now with the third sector division around this moving forward. It is in their strategy, it is in their action plan, but they need to commit to actually moving organisations and bringing in investment across the different divisions to make that a reality. It's not going to happen unless they do that.
Can I also shed some light on kind of what's happened with the Climate Challenge Fund as well? So yes, the Climate Challenge Fund is ending. The last projects are just winding up for the end of March next year. But where the Scottish Government is, they've put in so Climate Challenge funding in some form of guise will reopen again, but it's not, I'm led to believe that it's going to be via the Investing in Communities funding stream, again going back to that embedding things. And what the Scottish Government have done is there's 2 other initiatives that are happening. So there's regional climate action hubs and also the climate action towns as well. And the regional climate action hubs, so there's 2 pilots areas at the moment for the regional climate action hubs. One is Aberdeen Climate Action, who are covering Aberdeen and the Shire. The other is the North Highlands and Islands Climate Action Hub, which we are operating on behalf of the Scottish Government. So, and the aim of those hubs is to actually support third sector organisations, social enterprises, anything that's community voluntary, to form their own climate action projects, but also to give them an additional layer of support. I think there's a kind of widespread recognition that CCF didn't entirely work. It didn't always end up in sustainable projects at the end of it. And so the support that's on offer from the regional hubs is to try and create and sort of signpost people out and give that additional layer of support and try and reduce bureaucracy on projects as well. That's certainly the aim of it, but we're only 2 months into the pilot, so I can let you know a little bit later on, Linda.
So no, I think that's a bit of frustration as well around the pace at what's happening out there. There's lots happening, but trying to make sense of it and the pace of some of this and the frustrations at how long this is actually taking.
Yeah. It's a really, really confusing landscape, a really confusing landscape for any form of organisation. I mean, going back to the sort of the bits about the practical things, is I certainly believe that a lot of third sector organisations are doing all of the right things. You genuinely find that people that work within this sector are very conscious about things about their recycling, who their energy provider is, things like that. And I mean, we have an environmental policy. I'm in the middle of doing our net zero policy, and we've done those very simple actions, which I'm sure that a lot of third sector organisations, so they actually just took and wrote it down, they're probably already doing it. So things like our energy supplier comes from wholly renewables. We were actually with a wholly renewable social enterprise, but unfortunately they've collapsed. That just the way that we do our ordering, like one of the things that we struggle with being up in the north of Scotland is it's fairly difficult to avoid your sort of Amazons or anything like that. You know, it's very simple little things that you think, oh, you could just go into a shop and you could get it, like shoelaces is my one bone of contention. You can't buy any shoelaces in Thurso, but not that we're generally buying them for the organisation, but even reams of paper. I find it very difficult to buy a ream of paper here. So we have to generally order it, but we have a policy of everything goes into a bulk order, that even if they're not going to deliver it to us all in one box, we have made the effort of ordering it in one box, and then just trying to use local suppliers and all of those, you know, really good things. But I'm quite sure that a lot of the organisations in the sector already do these things.
Jimmy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've been fascinated so far by both presentations and also some of the questions. And it brings me in, while you were just chatting there, Joan, Rotary are community service volunteers. And we tend to fund all of our stuff internally because Rotarians are known for raising funds and doing things. I reckon that we seriously should be looking at a greater collaboration between the third sector organisations and Rotary, because some of the stuff that we're trying to do, I'm fascinated with what you are in fact achieving, and I'm kicking myself for not being more focused on that. So I'm responsible, well, I was responsible for the Rotary in the west of Scotland. That's from Fort William down to Stranraer, which is quite a sizable chunk of units. And I'm just wondering, Tabitha, I know that you're going to be circulating the presentations, because I'd love to get a copy of the list of third sector groups that Yvonne shared. And also I'd love to see a copy of your Thursday Development Trust strategy. I take it I'll be able to find that online, yeah?
Yeah, we've got all of our bits and pieces published, Jimmy. So it's just, I'll pop our website into the chat. But it's interesting you say it, because we actually have a fantastic relationship with our local Rotary, a really good relationship. There's a really good flow of communication between us. They've helped us out with various different things. We've helped them out with various things as well. Particularly when it came to, when the world changed last March, we did a significant amount of community support, and we're the community anchor for actually half of Caithness, delivering, your shopping, your prescriptions, all of those sort of things. And the Rotary really stepped in to help us with that, with both volunteers and financial support as well. And I certainly, the Rotary are one of the top of my list for our sort of net zero strategy and for our project board, because the Rotary here certainly do quite a large amount of sort of environmental projects that they're a very obvious fit to be quite heavily involved, and yeah, we've got a really good relationship with them locally.
Well, we've got an environmental team within the west of Scotland, and I think this would be fascinating. I was district governor a couple of years ago, and that's when COVID struck. I immediately reached out to Volunteer Scotland, and we've done a couple of projects with them, particularly supporting mental health. And, so that was why I was saying, the 18 suicides, it's a major impact, socially. So this has been a great, thanks a lot, Tabitha. I've enjoyed listening to this, and I look forward to being able to get the information from Yvonne and Joan.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jimmy. And I want to come back to your comment, Linda, because it's been a really interesting experience for us as well, getting engagement during COP26. And I think the huge learning experience, or what I'm taking away from this, is there's actually been so much noise during COP26 that people don't know where to look. Messages are getting lost. We're seeing it happen in our promotional sides as well. And for me, and I know for the Scottish Net Zero community as well, we're really looking at that legacy piece. What comes afterwards? Once all the noise and the protesters are gone and Glasgow kind of quietens down and gets back to normal, what are we left with as a country? And what then does that mean in terms of the action taken forward? And I know that, Yvonne, we definitely want a follow-up conversation with you as well to see how the Scottish Net Zero community can help build that bridge between the business sector and the third sector, because I suppose, and this is my personal bugbear, and I don't think it's alone. The third sector in Scotland is phenomenal in terms of what it's doing, and it's not getting enough recognition. Some of the organisations that I've worked with in Scotland over the last few years, I have been in awe of some of the stuff that's happening, and going, there's corporations, there's big business looking to do this stuff, bringing in lots of consultants with lots of money, and actually you guys are already doing it on the ground. You've got the way that it works, and that conversation and that collaboration really needs to come in stronger now, and knowing that we are bringing together the SMEs, who again are sitting recognising we can't achieve net zero without the SMEs. They're accounting for basically about 47% of Scotland's GDP. They're looking for support, they're looking for the conversations, they're wanting to know how to make a difference. And if we can start facilitating some of those conversations and pulling people in from all different sectors to create that collaboration, I think that's part of the legacy that really needs to come out of, the future series moving forward into the next years.
Yeah, I agree, Tabitha. I mean, if we're going to move forward, it has to move from competition, or the way it has been. I mean, certainly over COVID, we saw a significant response in collaboration and working in partnership across the third sector, the business sector, the public sector. That was evident, and that is continuing. and there might be less of a focus on it now as we've moved out of lockdown, but you know, a lot of learning and good practice, and what a difference that made to our communities to just cut through a lot of the bureaucracy and actually get things done, you know, and you know, deliver food parcels to people that couldn't, you know, couldn't access funds or access services and transport and all of that, and what a difference that made. And that is recognised, but it needs to be built upon moving forward.
Yvonne, sorry, Tabitha, I'd like to be involved in that element if you could keep me in the loop.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
I'd like Rotary to be part of the legacy. I think we've got a bit, you know, a fair amount to contribute.
Definitely.
If it's what Yvonne was saying there, I remember at the very start, you know, we got involved in the East End of Glasgow with Rogart SAS, you know, the soup and sandwiches, delivering that to those in the community that were A, either housebound or B, unable, you know, financially to afford it, because all the sectors were working from home. You know, Glasgow City Council Social Services Department actually turned to the Rogart SAS because they got together very, very quickly. So fascinating insight. Thanks very much.
I like that. And Cameron's just posted a comment saying, saw you guys out there, phenomenal stuff. So just a wee bit of recognition there. What's coming up for everybody else in terms of comments, feedback? I know we've heard from Stuart, we've heard from Jimmy, we've heard from Linda. I'm curious if there's anything else emerging. Nina, Juliet or Cameron, if you'd like to join and contribute to the conversation.
It's empty at the moment. I'll let you know if anything comes up.
Awesome. Thanks, Cameron.
You leave it to me. If I could jump in again and pick up on that piece about collaboration, absolutely endorse, amplify what has been said by Tabitha and Yvonne, and Cameron and I are relatively new into post, and that's something that we're trying to reinforce through our network activities, and to think about, I suppose, breaking down some of the silos, and even within our own network, and thinking about what synergies exist and how our own network members can come together to share their business skills, their learning, their phenomenal experience, and help those who are at an earlier stage in their journey. And with that in mind, we've been reaching out to West Lothian Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Small Businesses, so we can add the Rotary to the list of possible partners going forward. But since I've got Juliet on the screen, I'm going to make her aware that in her very busy mailbox, there is an email from me asking about the potential of the Net Zero Scotland community coming together with WellSen, our social enterprise network here in West Lothian, to make a bid to West Lothian Council for monies to carry out some benchmarking and action planning work, which would be for, say, you know, up to 10 organisations, 5 who are just looking at, say, scope 1, possibly scope 2, and 5 that are looking at scopes 1, 2, and 3. And really exciting these organisations about doing this work. And then from there, we could develop really valuable case studies. We could showcase what's been done and share that across the network, or work with Yvonne in to share it further. So just a wee gentle, ever so gentle nudge to Juliet. I've got a proposal there, and I would love to work with you guys. And if it's not you, Juliet, if you ping it on to whoever within the community that can be helping us, but I think this is a nice way forward.
Yeah, I'm really grateful, Linda, that you've kind of brought that up, because I think the thing that's been the most, you know, there's been so many themes, and, you know, we're going to be distilling this and moving it forward. But one of, I think, the fascinating things that is happening, the people that are showing up, there's conversations, there's connections, there's collaborations happening in the moment, not just on the calls online, but in person as well. You know, and Linda, that's just been a beautiful example. And I know that, you know, I can probably speak on everybody associated with the Scottish Net Zero community and say, we're definitely up for that. And, you know, whatever we need to do to make that happen, we'll get that in, we'll get it moving forward. Because I think, you know, speaking of some of the other directors, we're going through a rebrand at this precise moment. So we're Scottish Net Zero community, but we've set ourselves up as Net Zero Nation. And that's Gavin and James, who you might know, Russell Dalgleish, Tweedy Brown. And I also got asked to be a director for Net Zero Nation as well, which is kind of why I'm putting so much energy into the future series as well, to make sure that we can really kickstart it. And I know that if I got off the phone right now, Linda, and went and sent that message to them, I would get an immediate ping back going, awesome, yes, let's do it. You know, I don't even have to wait, you know, so I'm really looking forward to having that conversation. Let's get the conversation in next week. Juliet, you know, pick the email up and we'll see, you know, who needs to lead it. I mean, that's obviously a project there, Juliet and Nina, if that's something of interest, and we can figure out the best way to make it work.
Fantastic. That's great to hear such a positive response, and yeah, excited about what we can do together. And if you think there's a better pot of money that we can look to, you know, open to considering that, very much will draw from your experience. And since I've still got the stage, I think if I could say to Joan, what I think she's doing is absolutely amazing. It really is inspiring. You know, the creativity, the community engagement, you know, being such a strong and pivotal part of what you're doing. And I'm really interested to hear more about the development of the hub going forward and learning those lessons. As you said, the landscape is cluttered, the landscape is confusing. So it'd be really nice if there was something clean and sharp that we could understand and learn from going forward.
Yeah, brilliant.
We're certainly working on it, Linda. Yeah.
If you do have any breakthroughs about engagement, do pass those on, because that's something we're struggling to crack as well, to be honest.
Yeah, we're actually looking at, we actually did I'm not quite sure where it is, I think it's on YouTube somewhere, but we actually did a presentation for the DTAS conference, which was all about how we sort of done community engagement. There's no easy answer. It's really just keeping on treading the boards. I mean, we are very fortunate, and I don't know if it's because Thurso exists in this kind of microcosm that there's nothing else really around us. But in terms of, you know, like, we've got really good relationships with the Caithness Chamber of Commerce. We've got really good relationships with Highlands and Islands Enterprise. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of, when we tell the story of our sort of engagement that we did for the DTAS conference, we tell these kind of two layers of things. Is that there's all the engagement with the community, and that is for all intents and purposes, a lot of the ways that we engage with the community is very fun and very frivolous. It's not, you know, we don't get always that serious. Myself and one of our board members, who's actually the digital marketer for the Chamber of Commerce as well, some of our videos have, you know, we post frequently videos. Some of them are us standing in the sea, some of us, you know, doing very random other things, but it helps to reel people in, and it helps to, we just speak to people as, you know, it's not that here's Joan from the Development Trust, it's Joan meeting you on the street and saying, you know, what's the crack today, what's going on, and how are you getting on with your life and things like that. But then there's always been this other layer of engagement. There's the day job that goes in, which is all the community planning partnerships, the Highland Council, building all of those relationships that are there in the background, that we've just managed to do both and meet them in the middle, which is the way that, you know, we need to be bottom up, but also meeting the people that are coming from the top down.
Yvonne, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it was just on that as well. I was thinking in terms of, obviously, you know, we haven't had the numbers that we would have hoped today from the sector be part of this, but there's been some great discussion. But I'm wondering, you know, and given the fact that you've said, Joan, you've got a video, if after this we can actually keep the messaging going out. So, you know, if I can get a hold of your video and put that out through our social media and through our networks, and just some key messages, or, you know, if there's a sort of case study from today or the conversation that we can do is by way of follow-up, just to keep that momentum going.
And if I speak to that momentum as well, Yvonne, all of these are recorded, so they'll stay in the online space so people can still kind of capture in. And one of the things that we're committing to do at the back end of this is actually put all this into a book so that there can actually be a documentation, because the speakers and the themes that have come through from the conversations are phenomenal. The case studies of businesses, but you know, the case studies of what we're talking about here with Thurso, there's a real opportunity for this book to bring together so much collaboration and start clearing that roadmap and making it simple, you know. So that's something that I'm going to be following up with you, Joan, with you, Yvonne, to make sure that we've got your voice accurately represented in the book. You know, so I think our timescale, I'm always wary when you say things on live, but our timescale will be to kind of spend the time in winter over this and, you know, have a bit of a relaunch come spring, which keeps it nice and flexible. So sometime in spring, there will be a book with case studies and stories and themes and, you know, insight that's emerged from the Future series to help drive the collaboration forward. And, you know, the two people who are going to be helping to co-author it, Nina and Juliet, are sitting in the corner there as well. We've been having conversations about that, so that's going to be going on in the background. So any information, we'll be bringing that in to amplify it, because I think it's important to document the journey, because one of the things that I think I've seen, you know, throughout this whole net zero journey is that people get started and then all of a sudden, you know, they're so far down, they're becoming a B corporation, and everybody's like, but I've no started and you're over there. And it just seems such a big leap that it, you know, it almost freezes people. So if we can actually get the conversations and the stories going now and showing all these pathways, you know, bringing in the work, Yvonne, that you've been doing with the net zero strategy and being able to document that journey and that progress. I mean, that's for me how you build an ecosystem, because one of the things that I also see from a lot of the other communities that I sit in, every single time new people come in, it goes back to zero because they've still got the questions. And actually you need a really strong pathway so that you can be having conversations at multiple points so that people can come in and they can be accelerated, you know. So it's linear and it's circular in terms of how we're moving people forward. So obviously anything, and Linda as well, anything that we can bring in on that and put together and create a really practical how-to guide that will help people in Scotland and obviously beyond, because our ambitions within the Scottish Net Zero community, Net Zero Nations, is to really catalyse a movement of movements. And not only do we need the SME sector, but we need the third sector as well working together, because that's where the power lies. We've got a few minutes left. Is there any other questions, comments, feedback coming up from today's conversation? Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm just trying to respond to Joan there, and I feel I can talk faster than I can type. If you chat to your local Rotary, you've got Rotaract, which is within Rotary, and that's for the 18 to 30-ish. You know, people at 32, 33, 34 still stay involved with the Rotaract. And it gives them an opportunity to serve the community and also serve internationally. And there's a lot of opportunities for the young folk to realise their potential and maybe even do an exchange.
Oh, that's interesting. I know that the local Rotary here run a interface club with the kind of 5th years and 6th years at the high school, because I'm hoping to involve them in with the net zero strategy. Where we did the sort of bit that I'm talking about is the bit of work that we did with sort of those young men that were aged 18 to 25. We have quite a lot of young men here who are your 0 hours contracts. They're loading and unloading boats down at Scrabstow, and they're so disenfranchised they won't even claim benefits because they know that they're going to get sanctioned. They sleep on floors, you know, it's your unofficial homeless people and things like that. And that's actually this kind of greenhouses project. It's mainly for those young men. It's as a reaction to the sort of issues that they're experiencing in the community, where they really are disenfranchised, disengaged. And we've had a huge amount of success in speaking to them and engaging with them. And I don't know if that's a tip that I can give to any other communities, because the way that happened was, I have a 26-year-old son, and he knew, and it was go and speak to Jamie's mum. That was kind of the way that engagement happened. But it just snowballed. If you can get 1 or 2 people on side and they trust you and they know that you're not going to spread details of their personal lives all over the place, then, and you know that you're actually going to try and make a difference. It's having that trust factor in place that, you know, we are actually trying to do something that will make a difference to their lives, and they can see that we're actually trying to do something that will make a difference to their lives. And it's those young men that I think that for lots of them, there's no hope of them being able to maybe work for an employer. They're just not going to fit that skill set where they would ever be able to last for an employer. But let's take them into what we are trying to do in these kind of training facilities and climate and land and enterprise-based skills. And let's try and give them some skills where they might be able to launch their own enterprise. I would feel very confident that they could launch their own enterprise because they're already being very enterprising. We just need to channel it down legal methods. That's where we are with them. So, yeah.
Tabitha, I think that could be a title of a chapter, you know, just talk to Jamie's mum.
Yes, but do you know something? It's something about communities that I'm passionate about, because again, it gets into, if you don't have the trust, you don't get anywhere with people who've been disenfranchised and disengaged, because they've been, I don't even know the polite way of saying it, they've been shafted too many times by the system to want to trust, and that's the hardest part, and that's the challenge of bringing those people in, you know. And your story really resonates with me, Joan, you know, because my younger brother, I tell this story and sometimes people smile and I'm like, I'm not sure it's a smiling story. But when he was 14, he phoned up the biggest drug dealer in East Lothian with his friend and says, we want to do business with you. Now, hats off, 14-year-old. I mean, what an entrepreneurial skill set he had. But not really the legal methods to do, you know. And he was going, because he was so tall, he was buying the cigarettes for the kids, taking 6 of them and giving them 4, you know, and that's how he made his money as a 14-year-old. So it's like, what's possible when you challenge that drive? Because he wasn't educated in school, he was off doing his own thing. I mean, he realised that the more he disobeyed at school, the more he actually got out of school. And do you know, they put him on work experience at the age of 15 just to get him out the building because they didn't know what to do. And it's like, those are the young folk and the young men that have the most capacity to do stuff and to actually help create this just transition. And how do we really engage them, you know? Because that for me, it's like, you look at the SDGs, you look at what we're saying, just transition, let's leave nobody behind. That can't be rhetoric in terms of what we're doing. That has to actually be at core of everything, whether on a global level, a national level, or on a local level. And I'm just really grateful that you, Yvonne and Joan, have joined us for this conversation today so that we can bring it in and have a book title, Yvonne, called Just Talk to Jamie's Mum as part of this.
And give them mints and tatties as well. That's another top tip. Feed them mints and tatties.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for showing up and for a really engaging conversation. This has been the highlight, I think, out of all the conversations that I've had, because it's touched so many powerful moments and deep conversations, and I'm just looking forward to continuing the conversation afterwards. So thank you, Yvonne, for taking the time, sharing the strategy, bringing it in. Thank you, Joan, for talking about what you're doing at Thurso, Linda for sharing what you're doing as well, and for everybody else who's turned up, Jimmy, Nina, Juliet, Stuart, Cameron, to help make this a powerful and enriching conversation.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone's time.
Thanks.
Nice to see you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, guys.
Bye.